The visual is not important here. The music is not important here. The voice is not important here. What matters are the words. If you cannot listen to the words, you do not belong here. If you understand this, welcome to the Fate Club. There comes a moment when an outcome arrives exactly as planned, and nothing in the body responds the way memory expected. No surge, no release, no internal signal marking the event as complete, only a quiet confirmation that something has happened and already passed, as if the system that once celebrated arrivals has been gradually disconnected without ceremony or explanation. This neutrality does not feel like disappointment because disappointment still requires an image of how things should have felt, and that image has already dissolved somewhere earlier in the process, long before the result appeared, leaving behind a strange flatness that is not negative, not positive, and not in need of correction. What used to be called success now registers as information. A simple data point added to an internal ledger that no longer defines identity, direction, or worth, and the absence of emotional color around it feels unfamiliar only because the old circuitry expected a reward that the organism no longer produces. The body accepts the achievement the way it accepts weather, with mild acknowledgement and immediate recalibration, not because the event lacks value, but because value itself has shifted away from external markers and into a quieter, less reactive form of processing. Earlier, effort moved toward outcomes like a muscle toward resistance, tightening with anticipation, storing tension for the moment of release. But now effort unfolds without promise, without bargaining, without the internal contract that once said meaning would be delivered at the end. This is not burnout because burnout still aches for rest and recognition, and this is not numbness because sensation remains intact and precise, only uncoupled from the old reward pathways that once dictated emotional response. The achievement arrives and the system notes it, but nothing rushes forward to claim it as proof of existence, and nothing collapses afterward into emptiness because the need for proof has quietly expired. There is often confusion at this stage, not dramatic confusion, but a low-grade uncertainty about whether something has gone wrong, because the external world continues to insist that milestones should feel like something definitive, something conclusive, something that closes a loop. Yet inside, loops no longer close, they simply thin out and dissolve, replaced by a continuous, unpunctuated awareness that does not require punctuation in the form of applause, relief, or validation. The mind may attempt to reintroduce reaction, searching memory for the correct response, checking past versions of the self for guidance on how this moment used to be performed, but the instructions no longer load, and the performance does not resume. This neutrality is not chosen, and it is not trained. It emerges the way a reflex fades when it is no longer useful for survival in the current environment, and the organism adapts without asking permission from identity. In earlier conditions, achievement functioned as orientation, a way to locate oneself within hierarchy, time, and expectation, but as those structures lose relevance, the emotional charge attached to outcomes drains away, leaving the act intact and the meaning redistributed elsewhere. What remains is a clear perception of the action itself, the sequence of decisions, movements, and consequences, all visible without distortion, without the fog of desire or fear amplifying their importance beyond what they practically are. This clarity can feel unsettling because it removes the internal drama that once made effort feel necessary, urgent, and heroic, and without that drama, the question of why things are done begins to reconfigure itself on a level below language. The body continues to move, tasks continue to be completed, results continue to occur, but the internal narrator that once framed these events as victories or failures grows quieter, then irrelevant, then absent. Time behaves differently here, not because clocks change, but because anticipation no longer stretches the future into a charged space waiting to be reached, and completion no longer compresses the present into a celebratory point. Everything unfolds at a consistent density, without peaks demanding attention or valleys requiring recovery, and the nervous system responds with a steady baseline that does not oscillate in response to external confirmation. This state is often misinterpreted as loss of ambition, yet ambition still exists as motion without self-referential urgency, as action without the need to be witnessed, remembered, or converted into identity. The organism has learned, through repetition and exhaustion, that outcomes do not stabilize existence, and once this lesson is integrated, the emotional economy reorganizes itself accordingly. Achievements no longer function as anchors because the need to anchor has dissolved along with the fear of drifting that once made anchoring feel essential. There is no internal celebration because there is no internal audience, and there is no disappointment because there is no internal judge measuring distance between expectation and reality. What remains is a neutral, almost tender attentiveness to what is happening, a capacity to see completion without consuming it, to acknowledge arrival without building residence there. In this condition, comparison loses traction because comparison requires stakes, and stakes require an identity that needs to win something in order to continue existing as it knows itself. As that identity loosens, achievements stop functioning as currency, and the market they once belonged to quietly shuts down without announcement. The silence that follows is not empty. It is simply unoccupied by the noise that once filled it, and within that silence, perception becomes more granular, more immediate, less filtered through future-oriented tension. The world continues to reward, to punish, to rank, and to measure, but these signals pass through without attaching, the way background sound passes through a room when no one is listening for it. This is often the point where language struggles because language was designed to reinforce cause and effect, effort and reward, ascent and arrival, and when those relationships flatten, words begin to feel slightly misaligned with experience. Yet the experience itself remains coherent, stable, and quietly functional, even as it defies the narratives that once organized it. The neutrality surrounding achievement is not a problem to be solved. It is a symptom of a deeper recalibration in how reality is processed, where the nervous system no longer treats external outcomes as threats or guarantees. The old urgency fades because urgency belonged to a time when survival depended on constant evaluation of position, status, and progress, and those conditions no longer dominate the internal environment. What replaces it is not passivity, but a different form of engagement, one that does not spike or crash, one that does not require emotional amplification to sustain motion. Actions arise, are executed, and conclude, all within the same emotional register, and this consistency brings a quiet efficiency that does not announce itself. The absence of reaction becomes noticeable only when contrasted with memory, with how things used to feel, and even that contrast weakens over time as the old reference points lose relevance. Eventually, the neutrality stops being noticed at all, because it becomes the default state, the background condition against which life unfolds without commentary. In this state, achievement is no longer a destination. It is simply one of many events passing through awareness, equal in weight to rest, observation, and stillness. Nothing needs to be extracted from it, nothing needs to be stored for later use, and nothing needs to be explained. The system has adapted to a reality where meaning is not produced by outcomes, but emerges quietly from presence, from the unforced alignment between action and moment. There is no climax here, no realization to announce, only a gradual settling into a mode of being that does not require emotional punctuation to confirm its validity. Achievement happens and life continues, unbroken, unmarked, and quietly sufficient in its neutrality. If you understand this, welcome to the club.